all sorts of courses in biology, focused around introductory biology all the way through more advanced courses in infectious diseases and other types of courses focused on microbiology. So the world events right now are sort of timely with the topics that I'm trained in, and I think that as classes start up again in the fall too, we're going to have students who have a lot of curiosity about microbiology. I'm hopeful anyway, so keep us all busy. So my role today here is just to talk a little bit about what it might look like to finish up the next month as we pull all the pieces of a senior project in the sciences together. What do weekly meetings with our students look like? What sort of advice can we give them as they're writing up in a strange place for them and for us as they're pulling the pieces of their project together? What do these projects look like now? And they're going to be different from what they looked like last year, or even in the fall for students who had spring-fall senior projects. And so how do we help them navigate this? How do we navigate it with them ourselves? And also, what will the boards look like? How are we going to set up the boards? How are we going to get the students comfortable and ready to present their work? And how can we make it sort of a celebratory event for the students so that they see that they really are accomplishing something great here in finishing up their senior project? So I am easily interruptible. So I can talk a little bit about ideas that I have about the next couple of weeks. I can tell a little bit about what my strategy is. Yep, Rebecca?
Sorry, I was just going to say, everyone should have the chat box open while Brooke's talking, because as she's talking, I might put some things in the chat box just to kind of, have it in notes too. That's all.
Perfect. Perfect. I opened the chat box too, so I can see it. And I'm happy to share if we come up with ideas, or we come up with, if anyone wants to see anything that I have, if there's anything that I say that you want me to, after the meeting, send you anything, my contact information is very, very easy to find, and I'm happy to help out however I can. So the lab senior projects are interesting. For here on Annandale campus, most of our students, many, not all, but many of our students who are doing lab projects have either lab or field experiences where they're collecting their data, and they finish collecting their data. In biology on Annandale campus, we have a hard rule that tries to have students out of the lab, out of the field, all data collected by the week after spring break, which would be this week. So in some respects, a lot of the data was yeah.
We can't hear you. I think you cut for a minute.
But
you're back. You're back now.
Back again? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I was saying is the timeline of data collection. And so a lot of the students collect data throughout the year, with the goal being that they finish up the week after spring break. So that's when we pull the plug on labs, pull the plug on data collection, so that you have at least a month for sheer write-up and analysis. So there'll be some students who would be well ahead and ready to do the analysis and have collected a lot of their data when they left campus. There are going to be some students who would have maybe saved their data collection towards later in the process and might not have a whole lot of data to do analysis on. And that happens. We really understand that happens on a year where we're all on campus and having classes in person, and data is either collected or not collected, or there isn't analysis, or they don't get what they expected to get at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the year. And so I think that we can approach our guidance of them in the same way we might have a student who simply ran into troubles. Maybe, all of their field sites were demolished by rain, or all of their lab experiments were contaminated by a fungus. And we've seen those things happen. And we've actually seen students write beautiful projects that talk about what their question was, what their approach was, what data they hoped to collect, what data they ultimately did or did not get, and what that would lead them to for an analysis in the future, in sort of what we would say is future directions. So I think that one thing to do in the near future with students is to have that conversation with them and say, what was your question back in September? What was the question you were hoping to answer with your project? And then based on what you have, is there a question that you answered or not? And what is going to be your narrative that you're going to be writing up for your senior project thesis and the bulk of the writing? And that's what I think we would probably do with our students, whether they're here with us or we're working remotely with them. The strategy that I've taken with my senior, who is at home and working on her data as we speak and writing, is to have a weekly meeting at the same time every week, the same way we would if we were in our office. And so she has a deadline for sending me writing, and we're doing that online. And we have a standing Google Zoom meeting set up on our calendar that we touch base with on Tuesdays at 2:30. And I have writing from her usually on Friday, and I get it back to her with revisions, and then we talk about it. And we've also set up a schedule thinking backwards from the day that the projects are due. So as it stands right now, projects are due on April 29th. And we've been given an extension, I believe, till May 4th, so that there is an arc of days to get the materials into digital libraries and for students to wrap it up. And what we are looking at is working backwards from that perspective is giving the students at least a week and a half of sheer revision of their final document. And so I've made a series of, I think, 5 deadlines with my students that includes having a draft of the results. So in a biology project, and it differs between disciplines, but in a biology project, for example, we have an abstract, we have an introduction, which reads like a literature review, and students likely have done a lot of that writing. May a lot of the time work on the literature review in the fall semester. So they may be well on their way and have that edited. They have a materials and methods section. They have a results section. They have a discussion section. And then they have figures and legends that usually accompany their project. And so I've focused on one of those sections for the next couple weeks with them. And that's been helpful, I think, in guiding the student in having a concrete thing to work on each week, knowing that the documents are open. And the other suggestion I made to her was to make 5 separate documents for now with each of the sections on there. And so as she's working, what she's doing is working on her methods. But when she feels that she's edging more into what would be a result, she can put the content in the document that's labeled results so that that is building in parallel, so that she doesn't simply get distracted or forget some content, but she has essentially 5 places to be building the senior project. And what I've heard from her is that it makes her feel that she's making progress on the project as a whole organically over time in parallel. So we've been working on that. The other, I think, important piece to consider is that the students are not, the senior project experience can feel lonely on the best of days on a regular semester, that it's a project that you're working on by yourself. And it is an independent sort of excursion or experience, but there's a loneliness that happens even in any semester that we see. And so I think that there are ways that we can make this less lonely for the students and make them feel that the project that they're working with and the struggles that they're having and the successes that they're having are similar across the network. And one way to do this is to set up peer mentoring or peer reviewing workshops as it goes along. So we have these set up right now through the biology program here on Annandale's campus, mostly because we've set up, starting at the beginning of the year, a Google Classroom. So we treat it as if there was a class called Senior Project for Biology, and we enrolled all the seniors into this class. And then they have this forum and space to share their work with each other, to upload documents to be peer reviewed, to have a place for comments, for questions, for sort of announcements to be made for the whole class. And we set this up last fall. I taught the first semester of this for our seniors, and Mike Tibbetts is teaching it this semester. So this is already up and running, but we still have a month. And that doesn't mean that we can't imagine setting these up within campuses or even across campuses at this stage. We could set up this idea of cross collaboration, having students reading drafts of results and discussion, or drafts of figures, or drafts of materials and methods, or the introduction sections, and having these open communications. Student peer reviewers from the Learning Commons, we know, are excellent at sort of guiding students in their work. And we might even consider tapping into our various Learning Commons resources as well, and seeing if we can use that resource as a way of connecting our students with either peer mentors directly or with each other, right? They don't have to be trained to be able to read a senior project of their peer, but we might be able to use those resources. And I'm happy to help with that as we go forward to think about how we could make these connections happen. And so these connections could be something as simple as pairing up two students who are able to revise and review each other's work. Or we could say, here's a group of students who want to collaborate together. So peer editing, I think, is something. And if only so that students say, I really don't feel like I had enough work done. I really don't feel like I got enough work done. I hear that every single semester, honestly. And this is the time of the semester that I say to them, I understand that. The students often feel that they haven't gotten enough done. And I'm telling you, you have, right? This project is about growing and learning, and I promise you that you've gotten enough done. One thing that we can say to students in this idea of whether they have enough done is we often tell students that a senior project is done by one person over the course of 9 months, and it's part of their general workload. And so what they're comparing themselves to are primary documents often that they're reading, and they have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 figures in them. And those figures are made by a team of researchers who are doing that full time for years. And so I say to students, it's not fair for you to imagine that you should be coming up with one of those documents, right? A senior project often is one figure, one complete figure that has the question, the pilot experiments, the data collected, the replicates, the results, right? Your senior project is often a clean one figure experiment. That's what you have time to do. And most students have that, or at least they can think about that in a way that makes sense to them. So that's one strategy I use when I'm talking to students about who are worried that they don't have enough to write about, that I try to tell them they always have enough to write about. It's about framing what they have in a narrative that shows, this is the question I had, this is what I did to answer it. Yes, Irina.
And how many students working on the senior project do you have? You talk about peer reviewing process.
Right.
It's work good when students up to 10 or how many students do you talk about?
Right. So in biology here in Annandale, we have, I think, 21 students working on their senior project right now. So 21 are included in this cohort
And
of.
all of these your students?
No, so I personally only have one, but we combine all of the biology students into one group for sort of group meetings to say, you each have your own individual mentor, your research mentor who's helping you through your project, but then we have one faculty member who is mentoring the entire group as a whole, and helping them with their writing and peer reviewing. So I have this year one student, but the typical load in the SMC I see from David is around 3 to 4 students per faculty member. So even if we just had one faculty member with their own 3 or 4 students, peer reviewing could happen within those 3 or 4 students who are working likely on projects of a similar vein. Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. In Russia, we have special course which called Diploma seminar, where we gather together with a student once a week and discuss their project, and we did a lot of work about peer reviewing thesis when it was not they didn't get any grades for this. They just communicate and look at each other, and we have leaders and others. It was
that's exactly the environment that I'm imagining, right? So that would be the perfect place or cohort of students to be working even remotely, peer reviewing or helping each other out. Yeah.
How do you choose peer review from other students? It's their decision, or it's just you and you will be together?
I think that could be depending on what the advisor or the faculty member thinks is best. I often like students to peer review projects that they're not familiar with. So I find that works really well because it allows students to identify where there's a confusion or a gap that even the mentor might not see. So when I'm reading my student's senior project and helping her, I skip over pieces that she's vague about because I know how to fill in the gap. I know what she's trying to tell me if she's not clear about it. But if she gives it to another student who's working on a completely different model, they say, I don't know, I have no idea what you're trying to tell me here. And so they're actually better peer reviewers than students who are closely related to the topic. So I think any student would be a good peer reviewer for another.
What will you plan to do with the students which didn't finish the data gathering process?
Right.
And those of them who need to finish their thesis exactly in this year, we have such students.
Yeah, we do too. And so we have a couple of different strategies that the biology program's using. One is for students who collected some data, but not all of it. We're asking them to think about what their question was and think about what their question is now. What were they able to answer with the data that they collected? It's possible that they only did one trial of an experiment, so that they don't have enough to make any firm statements that something happened or did not happen, but they could say, this was my question. This is the experiment I set up to answer that question. This is the results that we had so far. This is the trend that we saw, but it might not be statistically significant. And this is what I would do in the future, or suggest to do in the future to finish the study. So that would be for someone who has some data collected, right? For students who didn't really get to collect any data at all, we're recommending that they write a project that's expanded in the literature review of what the question they were asking, reviewing the literature of why they were asking it and what's happening behind it, and then writing up a proposal about what the question would be and the experiments they would do in the future, should they have had time, right? Almost imagine what you would write for like a grant proposal, right? An aims, methods and aims that you would have for a grant proposal. So we're working with students, and we have a couple in that category who simply just didn't get any data collected due to all sorts of issues that happened with their own arc of the process. And so they're writing a more literature proposal-based project. And I think that there are some programs that do allow for proposal-based projects currently, and we're looking to that as a model as well. Yeah.
Do you consider to take data from the open data from the internet, sure, which could be close to, maybe not very close, but close, sure, from the point of view methods to, because students need to show their ability to perform statistical analysis, data, sure, processing.
I would say that we definitely have students who use data sets in their projects. I would recommend that if we're using data sets in our projects, that we say, this is the question, or this is the data set we have, this is how it was collected, this is our evaluation or analysis of the data set. What we don't want to do is say, imagine this is our question, and imagine this is our data set. And so we don't want to sort of manipulate the data in any way, but we could certainly have students look at a data set and run an analysis on it that's unique and distinct, and that they could show that their expertise in their ability to analyze it. That's for sure. And there are lots of data sets out there. One example of that could be in biology anyway, is to go on to our National Library of Medicine and CBI and download a genome. And then you could take that genome and reanalyze it with a new tool that is available, right? So in that case, it's a piece of data that's out there. It could be reanalyzed with a new computer modeling system or a new computer program, and then they could get some data out of it, or some results out of it, and then talk about it in relationship to what's already out there in the literature. So that would be possible. Mm-hmm. Any other questions for now?
If anyone has questions and you don't want to interrupt, you can put them in the chat, and I can then also flag them with Brooke.
Yeah. I want to make sure we have time to talk about the board experience and the board process. So I'm going to shift over to that for now, but I'm happy. Yeah, Sarah. Do you have a sense for how grading options might affect student motivations either way? So my sense of this odd semester and this unusual semester is to be very kind and understanding about all sorts of motivations. And so my feeling is that students honestly are dealing with things that we don't know what's going on in their households. And so it's hard to imagine what their motivations are, and hard to imagine, for me anyway, it's hard to imagine, you know, a student who is living with her parents and potentially grandparents and sort of navigating childcare for their younger siblings, and then trying to sense whether or not they're just simply trying to get by to get a pass, or they're putting in every effort to get an A. I worry a little bit, truthfully, especially if we're talking about students in the sciences, is that there's a concern out there about GPA for medical schools. And so the board that decides about medical school transcripts are still evaluating what's going to happen. And they haven't just made a decision yet. And so the backstory of this is, if a student chooses to do a class pass-fail, and the medical admissions board gets transcripts with pass-fail in them. Many times what they do is convert those passing grades to the lowest passing grade of a particular college. And in some schools, like Bard, that lowest passing grade is a C-, I believe. And so as students take pass-fail options, if they were to take 8 credits of a senior project as pass-fail, and those 8 credits become a C-, it could potentially hurt their admission or their GPA when they're being looked at for admission to medical school. I hope, I hope that the medical board and this admissions process has some humanity in them and understands about this 2020 semester. And I'm really hopeful, and the message boards I've been looking at are really hopeful that the board itself will make a distinction that any pass-fail courses will not be used to calculate GPA in the semester. That's the dream. That being said, I think students, we need to be mindful of maybe that's why a student might not choose the pass-fail option, but might be struggling mightily as they're trying to finish up their senior project in ways we might not even be able to anticipate. So does that mean we give them an inflated grade? I don't know. I don't know what that answer is going to be. I think we need to have a conversation amongst ourselves, amongst the faculty, trying to think about what we can do to make this as fair a process as we possibly can. But I think it's a real issue. I like to think optimistically that students aren't taking this as pass-fail and saying, great, I am able to sleep in and take an easy spring semester. I think that if they're choosing the pass-fail options, they're likely choosing a pass-fail option because they feel it's their only way out because of things that are drawing on them in the semester. But that's my own personal, I have no evidence of this, but that's my own personal feeling on the scenario. Yeah.
I got lost for a little. You have additional grading system for this semester. What is the pass-fail?
So here on the Annandale campus, there is a pass-fail option. So
is
for
it
class,
always the options or only for this time?
it's always an option for classes, and then programs can choose whether or not. So there are some programs that allow students to choose whether or not they're doing their senior project pass-fail. In biology, up until this point, we had not done pass-fail senior projects. We just hadn't as a program. I think we are allowing that option as a rule for this semester if a student desires it. But in general, here at Bard on the Annandale campus, students are allowed to ask a professor if a course can be pass-fail, and a professor can decide to allow that or not. So it becomes the faculty member's decision. In biology, for example, we don't allow pass-fail for courses towards the biology major, but we do allow pass-fail oftentimes for students taking our courses who are non-majors. So we have somewhat different rules depending on the circumstances, but that is an option here on the Annandale campus. And due to this semester, we've actually extended the pass-fail declaration by a student to go to the end of the semester. We usually have an earlier deadline, but we've allowed them to make that decision late, all the way to the last day of the semester this year. Does that help? Okay. Yes, we're now allowing them to make it at the beginning of the board meeting. Yeah, I think that is a reasonable expectation for I think overall we have to think this is a strange semester. It's unique and unusual. We hope not to be seen again in my lifetime. But I think that having this flexibility is an important thing for our students. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the board. So the board typically is a day of celebration. We think about it. In biology, we actually don't give the grade at the board. We tell the students that we don't want them to see coming into the board as they're going to get a grade and what is the grade going to be and have that anxiety. We say to the students, we want you to come into the board meeting excited to be part of this experience and to celebrate what you've learned and the process, and to be joyful about how you finished this really large scale, bigger than probably anything you've done so far, academic piece of work and piece of writing. And so we in biology schedule a board week, usually the week before the last week of classes in May. And we cancel all of our classes for the entire week. And we have all of our senior project boards and all of our moderation boards all scheduled within that week. And it allows us the freedom of when we would normally be teaching and when students would normally be in our classes to have moments to have blocks of time to schedule these boards. So we're planning on using that same block of time for our senior project boards coming up in May. And we have 2 faculty who have taken on that role in the biology program to arrange the schedule, just like we would on any given semester. So those faculty members are going through and looking at who's on the board. We know who's on the board based on a midway that happened earlier in the year. And so they're looking at who's on the board, they're looking at that collection, they're putting the schedule together. And what I talked with Rebecca a little bit about yesterday was this idea of maybe coming up with a Google form that could be uniform for programs that we give out to students and say, we're planning your board. Are there times during the week, this is the week that the boards are going to happen. Are there times during the week that you do not have available in order to do a board synchronously, if we're able to do one synchronously? Are you unable to do a synchronous board due to any number of things? Maybe it's connectivity, maybe it's time change, maybe it's any number of things. Are you unable to do a synchronous board? If you are able to do a synchronous board, do you have audio available to you? Could you do it over a phone? Do you have video? Could you do it over Google Meet? Are you comfortable doing it over Google Meet or Zoom? Is that something you're comfortable with? Are you in a space that you feel comfortable doing that? Would you feel comfortable being able to make a PowerPoint slide of your data or your figures so that you could present the way you would if you were in my office, showing a photograph or showing a data slide and saying, this is what I saw when I answered my question? Is that something you're comfortable with? And I think that idea of being mindful uniformly across the programs, of saying, what do we think students have, or asking the students, what are you capable of? What are you capable of in this sort of unusual time for the board? Let's make it that celebration of you presenting your work and talking about it. I mean, in our board meetings, I've been on a lot over the past 11 years, the conversations are often so collegial, and they feel like you're talking with peers about the questions you're asking. So much about what would you do differently if you had another year of senior project? What would be the experiment you are desperate to know about and do? How would you have approached senior project differently? We want to have that board, if we can, that synchronous board, so that they don't lose out on that fun, sort of like thrilling, rewarding conversation and celebrating of that conversation. So I think that that's a strategy in the next month that we can help across the network, maybe coming up, as we saw here, a Google survey or a Google form that we can come up with what that might look like, and maybe sharing it across the network to say, this is something that we can give to our students. We could even come up with an idea of how would we be able to do a practice board one-on-one with our students. This is what it would look like. Let's do a practice. I know I did a practice board when I did my PhD, or even my qualifying exam. I did a practice board with my friends and said, this is what it might look like. Maybe we can talk to students about how to practice what a board might look like. And then another idea that we were floating around yesterday, and I don't know whether or not this is possible to pull off, but we had this idea of what in the science division in Annandale campus, we do a poster session, and students create a poster that would be similar to what you would present at a national meeting or a regional meeting on your data. What if we had students make either a poster or an infographic using Canva or another resource like Mural? What if we had students make these, and then we set up time where we could open up a Zoom and have a network poster session where students could have their posters or have their data on display, and maybe students could do a 2 to 3 minute talk about what their question was and what they found. We could have breakout sessions. It might be a way for us to be able to have that sort of celebratory presentation piece of the senior project across the entire network. And how neat would it be for us to look at and talk to people in campuses far away from us? It may be something that we could do in subsequent years because it's so much fun, because it allows us to have that connection between campuses. Our families could actually come in and see it. We did a poster session for summer research this year on the Annandale campus. We usually do it one evening in September, and we changed it this year and did it during family and friends weekend. And the difference between the students presenting at that poster session, where they could show their families what they worked on over the summer, was remarkable. And we could do the same thing online. We could allow for our families to see us present professionally, see our students present professionally about the work they've done this whole year and be proud of it. And it might be a way or a moment of doing this. I would really like to, in the next couple of weeks, think about if we could figure out how to pull this off, because I think that it'd be a way of restoring a little bit of this celebratory moment of our senior project. Yeah. Are there questions that I can help with? I mean, that's what I'm thinking about. These are the ideas. Yeah, Rebecca.
I want to raise one other thing, the idea of asynchronous boards.
Right.
Which came up when we did the text-based discussion yesterday on text-based senior projects. I mean, all senior projects involve some kind of text. But one of the things that came up was that some students at this particular moment may not be able to do a synchronous board because of internet connectivity. It may be that which this hadn't actually really occurred to me, but someone raised it in our meeting yesterday, that some students may not be comfortable letting other people see what their house looks like. And in a place like Bard, where it's a live-in campus and it kind of levels the playing field, right. Once students are removed from that, then suddenly we're all different in a way. So one of the things we were talking about was how to do asynchronous kinds of presentations. And there's many ways that this could be done, but in order to just avoid things being emailed back and forth and to still give it a sense of, celebratory capstone feeling, there's a couple of tools out there that students could use to put together presentations, Mural being one of them. But there's another tool that I'm going to share with you in the chat message where students could actually put together a kind of PowerPoint, and then they could actually do a voiceover where they're talking the board through, and they could put images in. It's kind of a nifty little tool and pretty easy to use. So that's one idea of the way you could make it asynchronous and not just do it over email.
I think that's great. I really do. I think that is a great way of students being able to meet us where they're at, right? And we say that a lot. We say that a lot to our students. Meet us where, we have to meet them where they're at. And sometimes that means being understanding about what kind of data they were able to collect and analyze, what kind of things that they're running into while they're away, while they're at home, and sort of what we can do to make the best of the situation that we have in front of us right now. So I think, for next steps, thinking about a Google form, thinking about putting maybe together a list of these resources that we can circulate amongst faculty. And then maybe a few of us working on what this poster session, this network poster session for our seniors might look like. And working with you, Emily, thank you for that, about what big university or big institutions are doing, right, in order to have these meetings now in a time where we can't travel. The research is still going on, presentations still going on. This may be something that will allow us to move in a direction that we can continue this long after things get back to what we used to know as normal. Yeah. And I'm always available. Working with senior projects is something, and advising senior projects is something I've very much enjoyed my whole time at Bard and before that. And I'm happy to brainstorm about ideas, talk about, you know, what to do with a student who might be struggling, or a student who, anything. My contact information, I'm completely available for anyone who has questions or want to work on these kind of ideas.
And could I ask you a little more about board meeting? It's a meeting when all the work's already done and any changes couldn't be applied after this board.
I'm sorry, I think you cut out a little bit. Can you just repeat your question?
About board meeting, we don't have a board meeting in Smolny.
Okay.
It's during this, after this board meeting, students could apply some changes to their work, or it's already finished, it's presentation of completely finished work.
Right, so grading wise, students are graded on, in biology on the Annandale campus, we grade our students on the criteria for their senior project on the written document that they present at their board, their performance or how they did in terms of conversation at the board, the arc of their work and effort and independence over the semester, the 2 semesters that they worked on it. So we take into account how often were they in the lab? Did they come to their weekly meetings? Were they consistent in their effort throughout? And then we often say that we include this poster session in their grade. We do tell students, though, that if over their board meeting or the conversations that we have, if there are changes that they find that they need to make, maybe there's an error or they analyze the data incorrectly, and we bring that up at the board and say, you really should have run this analysis on the data. We tell them it's okay for them to make a text change in the document and resubmit it to the library so that the final version, the one that's in the library, the one that's searchable on the database, reflects their true work. So we tell them if they want to make changes, they can, but we don't usually grade them on those changes. And we often don't have many students who make very many. It's usually the document they hand in is the one we grade them on. Yeah.
Oh, in Russia we have similar, but it's more formal. Our employees, we invite employers from the industry, and all the students need to present their work, and it's called defense. But usually 1 month before, we have repetition. We have pre-defense when when faculty members from the faculty gather together, and students need to present their work. And after this, students have whole months to improve their work. And
so we don't have anything quite that formal. I would say it's the faculty member, their advisor reading it, making changes that happen, but we don't have them do sort of a pre-defense. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. And in some ways, it's not that different from our midway. So we have a midway board that happens, and that happens usually in December. And for some programs, it happens at the beginning of the 2nd semester in February. And the students sort of tell where they're at, and the advisors and the faculty members of the board then help them to craft the rest of the journey and say, this is what you've done so far. We see you having this much time, and then to finish, we think you should focus on these questions or experiments. We want you to make sure that you make your writing go in this direction. So we do that pivoting point at the midway, but not in the sort of pre-defenses you're describing. It's possible that you could still have a meeting with students and allow them to have like a midway catch-up meeting with faculty a month prior, and follow the same cadence or rhythm that you've had before. I think it would depend on what you have available to you now.
And also I have questions from chat. It's ACS. What is it was a message from Emily.
Yeah. So ACS is the American Chemical Society. And so, sorry, go ahead, Em.
Yeah, so we canceled our big national meeting, which was supposed to be last week. I'm one of the program chairs for the organic division, and so we're working to put all of presentations online that people submitted abstracts for, should they still choose to participate. I'm actually navigating right now, trying to find the link. This is a big, huge meeting, and so ACS themselves, they've created a place where folks can upload their presentations and their posters. And so I'm trying to navigate to that right now. It's still in the process of, people are still uploading through the end of April because, you know, they need the time to do that. But I'm happy to share that link. But also, like, Royal Chemical Society does poster sessions on Twitter. And yeah, they do. They've been doing these virtual poster sessions for a couple of years now, to be able to reach people that can't attend meetings, you know, and don't have the means to travel. So there have been poster sessions on Twitter, and then we've been talking just within our smaller division on ways we can reach our international colleagues, just in chemistry alone. But we are now doing monthly virtual symposia and really trying to do more virtual than in-person meetings, just to try to make sure that we're being inclusive to everyone in the field who may not be able to, you know, travel to go to a big meeting because it's expensive.
Right.
How it was organized? It was just a presentation uploaded, or there was a special schedule where you could go to poster and ask?
I'm looking at that right now. I will be happy to be part of our planning on how we do that. Since I just had my students withdraw their posters because it was just too much with the transition of all that's happening, because we were all going to go to Philadelphia to present our work. But because this is just, it was a lot happening in that short week of time where we were getting ready to go. And so they decided they'd focus their energies on their senior projects and finishing their senior projects instead of creating a more robust poster for this national meeting. And they may have another chance in the future. So I need to look at that more carefully. I'm aware of it, but it's such a big operation that ACS, which is their own corporation, they are in charge of doing that. But I will ask around and we can do something. So I like the idea of being able to interact with people, what Brooke was mentioning earlier, right? So this might just be an upload where the posters can be viewed, but I think that people can record. So you can record a description, you can walk through your poster, but there's no interaction. So I like the idea of the interactive piece of it.
Yeah, if we were to use Zoom too, I think there are breakout sessions and that ability too. So we could have it so that we have breakout sessions for different disciplines so that people could pop in and out of the different rooms, or we could break them out into other different ways as well. We could have students assigned at particular times and have different breakout sessions with students, and people go in and look at different projects. So yeah, I think that we have time now potentially to come up with what a system might look like. And I see the question from Mary Krems about the MAT, and I think that this might be a way of the presentations of the ARP that have been done in the past as well. That might be able to work for this kind of presentation and thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the benefit of the Zoom breakout rooms is you can also enable multiple people to screen share at the same time. So there could be a couple of posters showing at the same time. I mean, there's ways to work around this. There's also the whiteboard function if people want to do some jotting down of notes and share that. I mean, there are lots of plugins that we could be working with too in different apps. So I think there's lots of creative ways to do this if we can come up with some collaborative planning over the next couple of weeks. And
that sounds great.
Get some folks interested. Even if we don't do it with the whole network, if there's a couple of folks on this call who are particularly interested in doing this, exploring it and thinking about a way to connect with the wider network and do some poster sessions or even some peer mentoring, get in touch with one of us and we can, I certainly can help facilitate it. I'm not a scientist, I'm a historian, but I can do the legwork of connecting people and helping put this together.
That's great.
That's kind of my role.
This is perfect. Any other questions? Okay, so we're almost to the hour. And like I said, my information is pretty easy to find. And I'm typing it into the chat right now. But if you have questions, don't hesitate to email me, let me know, and we'll work on figuring out exactly what we can do to get you these Google Forms and whatever information we can put together for what might be these network-wide or even smaller online poster sessions if there are people who want to think about this. So, yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be down. This is recording, of course. I let you guys know that at the beginning, but I'll also be downloading the chat transcript and we'll keep a copy of it if anyone wants to go over anything again. And then we'll be in touch about, you know, some other brainstorming ideas and ways to connect people.
Great.
Good.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.